The Bruins just could not hold on in New York.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Thursday, February 6th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Today on the show, we are going to discuss last night's loss to the New York Rangers, all the storylines, stats, and signals that you need to take away from it, including some remarks from Don Sweeney made during the TNT broadcast. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. Now, despite a bit of a sleepy start on both sides last night, I think the shots at one point were like 2-0, more than halfway through the first period. The Bruins did have a chance to come out of New York with at least 1 point. They were up heading into the third period, perhaps understandably a bit sleepy because it was the second half of a back-to-back. But unfortunately, a mishandled puck by Morgan Geekie with the Bruins on the power play midway through the third period went the other way as Chris Kreider deposited a shorthanded goal behind a quickly fallen Joonas Korpisalo to give the Rangers a 3-2 lead that they would not relinquish. So many things went bad on that play. So many things went right for the Rangers even, as the puck skipped off Charlie McAvoy's stick, I believe. It was kicked up by Kreider back to himself. An almost, difficult angle at the very least. And again, Korpisalo going down a bit early in order to give Kreider more room than he needed in order to score that eventual game winner. The Rangers here take the season series and keep their slim playoff hopes alive by picking up 2 points on a team ahead of them in the playoffs. There were some positives in this game, to be sure. David Pastrnak extending his point streak to 12 games with his 28th goal of the season. Elias Lindholm got on the board, scoring his 10th goal of the season. But, and these two goals, I should add, were scored like 16 seconds apart in the second period after the Bruins had gone down 1-0 to the Rangers thanks to Artemi Panarin. But again, it was a very low event hockey game, and the Bruins just could not build on the momentum that they had developed by taking that lead. They had a power play late in the second period, going into the third period, that they weren't able to take advantage of. Brad Marchand was then called for roughing against Igor Shesterkin. It seemed like they had an opportunity to take the lead after Matt Rempe took a holding call against Pavel Zacha. But again, instead of scoring on that opportunity, they allowed the Rangers to come the other way, courtesy of a pretty muffed play on the part of Morgan Geekie, who has kind of cooled down a bit since his recent hot streak, and maybe lending more credence to trying to sell high. And we'll touch on that later, as Don Sweeney did talk last night about the Bruins' outlook heading into the trade deadline. Big picture, though, a disappointing one for the Bruins. Yes, it was on the back end of a back-to-back situation. Not a lot of travel, but still 2 games and 2 nights with some travel is not ideal. The Rangers had been rested. They hadn't played since Sunday afternoon, I believe. So they got 2 full days off. The Bruins coming in, having played the night before. Obviously an advantage for the Rangers. David Pastrnak described the loss as the Bruins' own doing. They were undisciplined, got scored on against the power play. Those are things that bite you in this league, he said. They didn't have their A game today whatsoever, but they were up after 2 periods, somehow thanks to Corpy and a couple goals. They just have to be better with the discipline and on the power play. Well, those things, Pasta, have been an issue all season long. The Bruins, undisciplined, in and out of the penalty box, and their power play has been pretty bad. Joe Sacco, after this one, added that, it's 2-2. After the Bruins had killed that Marchand penalty in the third period, you think you're still fine. Then you get your own power play, but you give one up at the other end, and it's disappointing, he said. So disappointing. Disappointing third period when you battle back and get a 2-1 lead on the road. He called it frustrating. And for the Bruins not to come out even with a point is certainly disappointing. And, credit the Rangers for their resiliency in the third period. They're trying to dig themselves out of an even bigger hole than that was dug by the Bruins, and somewhat putting themselves back in playoff position. But both teams, as we'll see here coming up in a moment when we look at some of the notable stats from this game, remain on the outside looking in and still have pretty big hills to climb if they want to jump back into the playoff race. The Bruins have 1 game remaining before the Four Nations face-off. That will be on Saturday against Bruce Cassidy and the Vegas Golden Knights. Get the sense that it could have been a different story for the Bruins had they played New York tonight instead of last night, avoiding that back-to-back situation, but such was the schedule, and the Bruins just could not create any momentum, could not take advantage of that power play opportunity that was gifted to them by the Rangers playing Matt Rempe in a tie game in the third period. And I echo Joe Sacco when he says it's disappointing, frustrating, but it's typical of this team's season. They were looking for just their second 3-game winning streak of this season. They've only done that once all season where they've been able to string 3 games together. You think at times, oh, that was a pretty good statement win. Let's build on that. They have consistently been unable to do so. And last night's performance, certainly best kept off Broadway, perhaps. And the roller coaster continues up and down. Those 2 paths remain on the table. We'll update that later when we look at Don Sweeney's comments, and we'll take a look at some more statistics to note from this game here last night as the podcast continues. If you're planning to go to a game, a concert, a comedy show near you anytime soon, then Gametime is the place to go. Gametime Picks makes it easier than ever before to get tickets at the right price. The app does all the hard work for you by curating the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Gametime Picks for a while now, and I love it because the curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at great prices. And the seat view feature allows you to see exactly what to expect when you arrive at the venue. You're also covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation if something comes up. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime, last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. As I mentioned already, it was a low-event hockey game for the Bruins and the Rangers last night. The shots were, I believe, 22-17 in favor of the Rangers, and it took the Bruins a remarkably long period of time in order to even record their first shot on their first attempt. Even I believe didn't come until halfway through the first period. Shots were 8-4 for the Rangers after one, 6-6 tie in the second period. The Rangers had an 8-7 advantage in the third, and neither team was able to score on the power play last night, each going 0 for 3. But the Rangers did have the special teams advantage by recording that shorthanded goal on the third period power play that was offered to the Bruins by Matt Rempe. The Rangers were much more aggressive in terms of hits, 32-17 in their favor. They were blocking a lot more shots, 22-9 in their favor. The Bruins had 23 giveaways compared to only 14 for the Rangers. And therefore, it's not a shock that the Bruins did not come out in this one. They did look a bit, I don't want to say listless, but certainly not as much energy as they had the night before when they beat the Minnesota Wild by a score of 3-0. At 5-on-5 in this one, the shot attempts were fairly even, 42-40 in favor of the Bruins. The Rangers at 5-on-5 had a 19-12 shot advantage. Scoring chances were 18-13. High danger chances were an even 7-7. The Rangers had a slight advantage in terms of expected goals. In all situations, though, while the Bruins did have 51.5% of the shot attempts, the Rangers had 56% of the shots, 55% of scoring chances, 53% of the high danger chances, and expected goals were 2.9 for the Rangers compared to 1.69 for the Bruins. So it kind of was what it was last night when it comes to the end result. The Bruins just did not generate enough to get it done. Pastrnak did have a goal to extend his point streak to 12 games. Elias Lindholm with the other goal. The only other Bruins to record forwards, I should say, to record points were Zacha with an assist and Marchand with an assist. Zadorov and McAvoy chipping in offensively with assists from the blue line. McAvoy's put together a pretty good little stretch here since returning from injury. I believe 2 goals, 1 assist in 4 games since his return. Of course, it's from New York, so we expected a nice game from him. In net, Korpisalo with 19 saves on 22 shots, gave up 2 even strength goals and the 1 shorthanded goal. A decent game overall for him, but not quite sure what he was doing on that final play when he certainly tried to do something, but it did really not work out. The one big stat to take a look at, of course, is the standings update following that game. Both the Rangers and the Bruins still outside of the mix when it comes to the playoff picture. Right now, the Bruins are still level with Tampa, who's holding down the second wildcard spot, but the Lightning have 4 games in hand. The Bruins' record is 27-23-6. So that's 27 wins, 29 losses, but they've accumulated 60 points out of a potential, 112, giving them a .536 point percentage. If you stack them up conference-wide, the Bruins sit 9th in the East in terms of total points, 1 up on Columbus, 3 up on the Islanders, 4 up on the Rangers, 5 up on the Canadiens, and then 7 up on the Penguins, the Flyers, who are barely holding on here. When it comes to point percentage, though, the Bruins fall down behind the Red Wings, who are ahead of them. Sorry, I already mentioned them. The Blue Jackets, the Islanders, and they're just ahead of the Rangers right now in terms of point percentage. So still a very uphill battle for the Boston Bruins. Their goal differential is now at minus 24, which puts them 13th in the East. Only Montreal, Philadelphia, and the Penguins have worse goal differentials. The Sabres, who are well out of it, have a minus 12 goal differential. They've won 4 in a row. And the Bruins, again, minus 24. Only the the Canadiens at minus 25, the Flyers at minus 30, and the Penguins at minus 37 have worse goal differentials. And in fact, league-wide, the Bruins near the bottom. You got the Canadiens, Penguins, Flyers, along with the Ducks, Predators, Blackhawks, and Sharks are the other teams with worse goal differentials. So if you stack the Bruins up league-wide, they're not really what you would call a good team. It's kind of remarkable that they're even in the playoff mix still. If you look at goals for per game, they rank 25th. Goals allowed per game, they rank 23rd. Their power play is now 30th in the NHL. The penalty kill is now 23rd in the NHL. So all of those metrics are not super positive. Yes, they have played better under Joe Sacco. They've had a decent start to 2025, and that's largely due to the play of David Pastrnak, who's been an absolute beast. They're 7-8-2 in 2025. So despite the fact that Pasternak's been on an absolute tear, they're below 500 here in 2025 and not really making any gains. David Pastrnak, if the Bruins are to make the playoffs, David Pastrnak surely has to be in the Hart Trophy conversation. Since January 1st, he leads the NHL in goals with 15. The next highest is Leon Draisaitl, who leads the NHL in goals and points. He also has 15 assists, which is second only to Mitch Marner, who has 16. In terms of total points, Pasternak's got 30 in 17 games in 2025, 5 more than Leon Draisaitl, who, again, is the league's leading scorer. Overall, in terms of scoring, Pastrnak is now tied for 6th. Still 14 points behind Draisaitl, 13 behind Nathan MacKinnon, 10 behind Nikita Kucherov. But if he's able to jump into the top 5, then he certainly should be warranting some Hart Trophy consideration, especially if the Bruins make the playoffs. If they don't, it's generally a guy whose team makes the playoffs. But if they do, it will be in large part to his performance. And he's got to be in the Hart Trophy conversation, just full stop. I mentioned Don Sweeney talked during the game last night, and we'll discuss what he offered in terms of an update on their mentality heading into the trade line here as the podcast continues. We've been talking about it a lot over the last little bit, these two paths that the Bruins are facing heading into the NHL trade deadline. That phrase was not coined, but presented by team president Cam Neely. They can either add in an attempt to strengthen their standing and playoff hopes, or they can retool a bit and keep an eye out for the future while still perhaps contending for a playoff spot if you replace players that you are sending out with some of the youth you have, or bring in prospects and maybe some roster players as well. So here's what Don Sweeney said during the TNT broadcast. He was brought on because he's part of Canada's brass for the Four Nations face-off. But he was asked about the Bruins, and he said this, quote, "It's been a little unique for us this year, getting out of the gate, not as fast as we would like, and we're in the middle of things. It's a tough exercise to sort of play both sides of the street, but I think that's almost every year what a general manager is required to do. Test what's out there, what's available, how you can improve, hopefully how you can improve the whole hockey club. We have some areas we would like to, but we have to keep an eye out." He did add that the injury suffered by Hampus Lindholm early on in the season has affected the team, but he's not using that as an excuse either. He said, quote, "Everybody goes through injuries. You've got to battle through it. You've got to find a way. While I'm out there trying to improve our club, if we have more injuries or we don't do the job between now and the deadline, we may have to take a different path." So, what does that tell us? Well, he's still looking to add, still looking to improve the hockey club, which is his job. You never want to actively be in the job of dismantling. The Bruins have no appetite for a full-on rebuild, a full-on teardown. Again, you have Jeremy Swayman, Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak. You're not going to be trying to tear things down at this point. You want to be building around them as they continue through their prime years. But again, a loss last night. They're out of the playoff picture. Trade deadline is 1 month from tomorrow, and you have a 2-week break in there for the Four Nations, which, yes, could allow Hampus Lindholm to get healthy and come back to the lineup shortly thereafter. But I think there's only 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks from when the Four Nations is over. The Bruins resume play on the 22nd of November, and then the trade deadline is set for March 7th. Let's just take a look at the schedule real quick and see how many games the Bruins have between the Four Nations face-off and the trade deadline. So they play again on Saturday. They don't play again until the 22nd of February against the Anaheim Ducks. Then they take on the Leafs, Islanders at home to end the month of February. They take on the Penguins on the road, the Wild on the road in a back-to-back to begin March. Then they host Nashville and then go to Carolina before the trade deadline on March 7th, which is a Friday this year. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games remaining prior to the trade deadline, but over a month for Don Sweeney to make some decisions. He will, of course, be somewhat preoccupied over the next couple of weeks with the Four Nations face-off. Again, he's part of Canada's management team, so unlikely that the Bruins will do anything during that break. He's still looking to improve the team, but he acknowledges the reality that they're running out of time to make up the ground after a tough start. And perhaps what's best for the team is to, try to remain competitive this season, but also to get a decent draft pick because you have your 25 first rounder. Don't trade that. And to hope that after a more normal summer, contract drama-free, you have Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov having a full offseason, knowing there'll be Bruins, hopefully healthy in training camp, that things will look a bit better come this time next year. So that's the latest from Don Sweeney. Those are the signals we can take away from last night's game. Still a bit of a mixed message, but very interested to see what he does here. And of course, there's real questions about whether he should be the guy. Maybe the retool should involve a front office retool as well. That's very much a conversation that probably should be had, because your two key free agent acquisitions have not really panned out, or at least one of them in Lindholm, despite the goal last night. Anyways, on tomorrow's podcast, we will preview the game on Saturday against the Vegas Golden Knights and bring you all the latest on the black and gold, because that's what we do here on Locked On Boston Bruins. Check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey next for all the latest to get an edge on the competition this week. And it's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.